Hi, everybody. This is Philip Martin, and this is On Film on Video for August 5th, 2022. It's a big section this week. I'm kind of proud of this section. I want to call your attention to a couple of things. First of all, Jordan Mears' New West, which is, I haven't seen it. I've seen the preview, I've seen the trailer, and the trailer looks really kind of fun and good. And a couple things that really, it's going to be playing at Ron Robinson Theater on August 25th. And you can find all this in the story that we have about it, and $10 and all that stuff. And it's a couple things that really bode well for it. And I'm going to watch it before, and I think review it in a couple weeks right before the screening. But a couple things about it. Number one, I'm really kind of tickled that it's only a 45-minute film, because I do think that sometimes young filmmakers and first-time filmmakers and people who are making films on their own are sort of, they're either going to make a 20-minute short or they're going to make a 2-hour or 90-minute, feature. And I'm not sure that's always the best thing. I think that sometimes we get the idea that it's not a movie unless it's 80 minutes long. And I would rather let the, material dictate the length. I mean, there's a perfect length for just about everything, and often the perfect length is 0 seconds. But I'm really kind of, when I see it's 45 minutes, that doesn't put me off. That makes me think, well, this is a smart move, because this is what the guy has. This is maybe a calling card, and if you like this idea, we can blow it up into a feature film, or it can serve as a standalone, kind of thing. It's just kind of savvy and kind of smart. That's that. The second thing is that I did not, when I was emailing with Jordan, I did not say I'll review this film if you'll send me a link, because for the very reason that a lot of first-time and young filmmakers smartly don't really want their films reviewed critically. And that's understandable, because you're working from poverty usually, and you are working with amateurs in the good sense of the word. I mean, the best sense of the word, someone who loves their vocation, but aren't necessarily well trained or being paid for it or expert at it. And, it's sort of like, you're going to submit this for review. Well, if you're going to submit for review, I'm going to review it. And I'm not going to give you a hometown discount on it, So, and the fact that he suggested it, I said, oh, okay, sure, I will definitely take a look at it and review it before then. So it makes me think that A, he's got confidence, B, he's very smart. And then you look at the trailer, and it's very smart and kind of silly, kind of funny. But I've got a soft spot for silly, funny, crude sort of things. So I think it's got a really good chance to be pretty good. And even if it's not pretty good, it's still a big accomplishment, because it's really hard to make a movie, even in this era when you can shoot it on your iPhone or your iPad, and everybody knows how to cut, and you've got iMovie, which is what I do this thing on, which is if I can do the technical stuff that requires to do this, and I don't do all of it, thank you, Nick. If I can do it, anybody can do it. Let's just put it that way, because I basically do this in real time. I don't spend more than an hour or so, really working on it, because it's not my job. I mean, I could stop doing it, no one's going to say, well, you stop doing that, we're not going to pay you as much. Okay, it is just something I do extra and all that. But anyway, that's New West, and New West is coming out, and Dan Liebarker wrote about it this week. It's been written about a lot. Jordan Mears, the director, writer, co-writer, he's pretty savvy about PR. I'll give him that, and he's gotten a lot of press on this. And now we'll see what the movie's like. But I'm pretty confident the movie will be okay. Maybe not the greatest movie you've ever seen, but for 45 minutes, you'll be entertained. That's the way I look at it. That's what I'm expecting. So anyway, well, moving on. I'm watching. I just started watching Ethan Hawke's documentary about the Joanne Woodward and Paul Newman, the last movie stars. And it's I've only seen the first episode, but it's if I were inclined to binge, I would binge this one because it's really fascinating, and the way they're doing it is fascinating, and the level of warmth and good feeling that the people who are involved in making this seem to have for the subject is really it's kind of touching. It's kind of it's really nice. I met Paul Newman once, and it's not a big deal, but it was the Road to Perdition movie. They were doing interviews for it, and I got to interview him and Daniel Craig and Tom Hanks all on the same day, and I remember all those interviews pretty well. But Newman was the only one that, of course, Daniel Craig wasn't a star then, but Newman's one of the very few movie stars who actually kind of got me off my game a little bit, kind of shook me a little bit, because you are meeting somebody who you're meeting HUD, and when you're meeting someone like that, you're on one level you're aware that they are this persona in front of you, and that behind that persona there's an actual human being, and that what your whole trick is to do is to get around the persona, the image, and talk to the real, and they'll appreciate that. I mean, it's sort of like, if you can do that, that's what they want to do. They want to communicate with you one-on-one. And nobody wants to be, the cardboard cutout, which Paul Newman probably spent, 90% of his, waking adult life was Paul Newman. I don't necessarily wake up and think of myself as, Philip Martin. I don't do that. I mean, it's just me. I just do what I do, go to the golf course, go to the gym, go to this, go to that. But if you're Paul Newman or Joanne Woodward, you really can't do that. And even though the era that they were popular in, the era that they came up in, was not the same era as ours, it wasn't this social media saturated, every minute live streamed sort of culture, it was almost worse in that you didn't really ever even think about these people as normal human beings, as people who had to do the everyday sort of things that people do. And so I'm trying to talk to Paul Newman this way, and I think we sort of connected in a way. I mean, we talked a little bit about Cleveland, where he's from, and we talked a little bit about, being... One of the things I think we share is that Paul Newman and I both have this kind of imposter syndrome, or he had, because, I don't think he ever thought of himself as a great actor, and I certainly don't think he thought of himself as someone who had a great deal of natural ability as an actor. I think that he saw himself as somebody who put in the work and was lucky enough to look like Paul Newman. And it's just not, I don't think he would have disputed that. But it's a different sort of thing than being, for instance, a Marlon Brando, a Montgomery Clift, even a James Dean. He is the plotter, the guy who probably wouldn't have been a movie star had James Dean not been, killed in an auto accident. And, he would have, or maybe he would have been. But, I think he's an excellent actor, and I think that he's one of my favorite people to watch on screen. Ethan, I spent like a couple hours with Ethan Hawke one time. I bought him lunch, which he owes me, because he left his wallet at home. I bought him lunch, and so I'm acting like I know him. I don't know him. I spent, like I said, a little bit of time with him to promote a movie. But anyway, Ethan Hawke is got this really great way of approaching. I don't think he ever met Newman. I think he says that in this. I don't think he ever met him. But he has sort of the same experience as I do. He's a little younger than I am. But his first exposure to Paul Newman was Butch Cassidy and Sundance Kid. And you watch these two, and to be absolutely honest, I used to identify way more with Robert Redford than I did with Paul Newman. But that was back before I realized I was no Robert Redford. No way was I Robert Redford. I mean, it's just two different kinds of personalities. I think that it's sort of like you imagine yourself as one of the Beatles. I mean, there's sort of like there's four slots you can fit into, and most people can kind of force themselves into one of those and think about how they would fit. I'm much more a Newman-esque character than I am a Redfordian character, but let that go. We should never have gotten into that actually, because it sounds really bad. But it's like I do think we identify with some of these people in different ways, and that's why they're movie stars, because we are able to use them as our proxy, as our surrogate, easily. And all I'm saying is that at first I was more related. I related more to the Redford kind of character than I did to the Newman, but these days, Paul Newman's probably my favorite movie actor of all time. I'd rather watch him in anything. And part of that is because I think he's really underrated. It did take him a while to get started. And I mean, Sweet Bird of the Youth, but they do have a little clip in this thing of The Silver Chalice, which is a really terrible movie. That I don't know if it was his first starring role, but it was that. But but when he hits, and this is not in this first episode, but when he hits HUD, he really sort of, more than Brando, more than James Dean, more than Montgomery Clift, really sort of he sort of sets the mold for this American anti-hero. That's who everybody proceeds from. It's not those other characters. It's not Monty Clift character. It's not a Brando character. It's HUD. HUD is the cynical, wisecracking, really bad person, really bad guy. I mean, deep down, and he knows it. He knows how bad he is, and that's the American anti-hero. He's not this. Really, trust me, I'm going to write about this sometime. But HUD is where it all switches around. It's not before. Before those guys had redeemable qualities. They were damaged somehow. They were whatever. HUD is just this reprobate. And he's got his backstory. He's got his... And Newman is so good in that role. He's so good at it. Maybe the reason is because he's not acting in the way that it is offhand. It is sort of, there's a kind of nice, and I don't know if it's Sandy Meisner or someone else who talks about it. I don't think so. I think it's somebody. I think it's a modern actor, and maybe it might be. I don't know, but watch the series, and they're talking about it, and we've talked about this before. Is how method acting is really putting yourself in the place of the character, and you are reacting to whatever is happening to the character. But the way you do that, because you're not really experiencing that, is that you conjure up a congruent memory, something that like when you were really sad, and then you play through that, then you use that as your filter through the dialogue you say. And what Newman did was he kind of took it down a little bit. It wasn't as histrionic, and it felt, at least to me, it felt more real than James Dean and Rebel Without a Cause, because that's not me, and I don't think it's a lot of us. It's some of us, maybe. And always, Brando's a interesting thing, because Brando's really, really eccentric to me. I mean, his characters feel real to me, especially, I'm talking about 50s Brando. His character, even 60s Brando, his characters feel real to me, but they don't feel like me. They are very different people than me. Newman is someone who's very much like me. That's the way and I'm spitballing because I have not didn't workshop this or anything else. I'm just thinking about how and why I relate to him better and more completely than I do with Marlon Brando. There are other actors who are like that. I think Tom Hanks is like that, and I think that's why so many people, so many of us actually relate to Tom Hanks because he has a very kind of normal thing. Now Newman's not that normal. Newman's positioning is really of the guy who is the imposter syndrome stricken guy in a lot of his movies. And it's kind of cool. Later, he becomes, kind of an icon of cool. And he was a very cool guy. He was, I'm not wearing his watch today. I'm wearing an Omega Moon watch. But I don't have one of those Newman Daytonas. I kind of wish I did, but then I'd have like $1 million watch and I wouldn't know what to do with it. But anyway, Newman is a really interesting everyman. And you watch something like WUSA, where he plays this disc jockey guy, and some of his lesser movies, some of the movies that you don't really think about when you think about Paul Newman, and you really get this sense of how normal he was, aside from those incredible blue eyes, which somehow read even in black and white, So, but I'm looking forward to it. And I really do think that the way they're doing it. Apparently, they'd made a bunch of recordings for a Newman biography, and the tapes got destroyed, probably because somebody didn't want the tapes heard. But there were transcripts of these tapes. So, what Ethan Hawke, Mr. Hawke, decided to do was to do it like a radio play with all these people reading different parts. The guy who does Gore Vidal is just amazing. I don't know who he is. He's obviously a talented voice, but a lot of people you'll know who are in this. Vincent D'Onofrio, just a lot of people. George Clooney has the Paul Newman role, and Laura Linney has the Joanne Woodward role, and it's a story about them. It's a story about their love story, but it's also a story about the trajectory through this sort of Hollywood thing. And they come from this old Hollywood, and they're still working after the turn of the century. So they really and the idea of the last movie star, that's something from Gore Vidal, which makes sense because they were the last people who were really treated like these sort of icons who came through. And now anybody else who's come up after that has come up in a different environment where there are different expectations. That's what it is. I mean, I still think you could make a case that Tom Cruise or Brad Pitt are the last real movie stars because of the way they command the screen. But it's also kind of apt for that generation. That generation is basically gone now. Well, they are gone. There's no Audrey Hepburns out there anymore. Anyway, highly recommended. Don't miss it. Last thing. Boy, that went quick. Last thing is I want to talk a little bit. I'm going to start people tell me all the time that I am like the czar of this movie section, and I can do whatever I want with it, I guess, until I do something that people don't like, which we will do occasionally. We will eventually do that. We will eventually find the line. We haven't found the line yet, so I'm going to try to do something different with the OnFilm column, which I think I'm going to rename. Not the OnFilm, but the new movies column, because I started calling it new movies. It's kind of cheeky because I wanted just to kind of, play off the idea that every movie's a new movie because you can't see the same movie twice. Don't get it? Well, it's true. You don't see the same movie twice because you have a different set of experiences that you bring to watching it, and nobody sees the same movie as you do. But anyway, that's what we try to do with that. I'm not sure that works. I think that what I'm going to start doing is writing more and more about older films. We do that with our flashback column, which is an occasional thing we run. Also, very excited about adding a new member to our team, who I'll talk about next week. And I hope that he'll be doing some of that too. Some of that, because to be absolutely honest, I want to keep writing about the movies, but I want to write about them in a way that emphasizes how important they are, and that how much they matter to us as a culture. And I'm not sure the best way to do that is to spend a lot of our resources chasing down, streaming films, every streaming film, or some of these movies that even open theatrically these days, because they're just going to be around for a little while. And if we can review them, fine. If we can't review them, maybe not. I don't care. Maybe I don't care. I don't know. But that's the new philosophy, or actually the old philosophy that's just... So expect some changes. Expect some changes. All right. And the very last thing is that, I just got through with the annual film festival sort of thing that I do at Riverdale during the summer. And I showed 4 movies, and they were all pretty cool. Hard Day's Night, Bonnie and Clyde, Ace in the Hole, and I finished up with Godard's Breathless, which was really great. It was really fun, had a great time. But during the whole thing, I was talking a lot about Billy Wilder and talking about, how things come from one place and go to another place and then come back. This rebound effect that you saw with the Beatles and the Rolling Stones. It took the American R&B, blues and stuff. It went over to England and bounced back as something else. Well, that's also what kind of happened with film noir. Only film noir really started over here in Germany, and then went to the U.S. via Billy Wilder and others, and then bounced over to France and Cahiers du Cinéma with Truffaut and Godard and Alain Resnais, and it came back as the French New Wave, and the French New Wave begat Bonnie and Clyde and all these other sort of things. And I'm always really fascinated with that. But one of the things that came out of that is I wrote a song about Hannah Arendt, the philosopher, and Billy Wilder, who happened to have been born in the same year, a few months apart, and I imagine a meeting for him. And so here you go, musical interlude to get out of here. Hannah's sitting at the bar, drowning her brown eyes in drink. Another apostle of reason pours on the abyss's brink. So Billy, not unkindly, removes his hat and takes a stool. He looks at her through the mirror, says, "Bitch, you've been a fool." You know that Audrey Hepburn disappears when she steps out of the frame. She's just a skinny kid with glasses, a good person all the same. She's not the one you'd mark for a star, she's not one you'd mark for fame. She's just an accident, a light and limbs projection of your lust and shame. Just an accident, a light and limbs, a projection of your lust and shame. So Hannah looks at Billy and she tips her glass of scotch. When he goes to light her cigarette, well, she glances at her watch. She says love's a kind of craving, it's a kind of letting go. It's just animals behaving, I know you're just a gigolo. Billy doesn't mind the manner, 'cause he's read this room before. He says I was a taxi dancer In Vienna, I pray the Great War. I really wasn't all I was, and I had much to avoid. I used to cry with Melina Dietrich. I used to fix with Sigmund Freud. So I'd ask you to forgive me, miss, all of my insouciance. If your boyfriend was a Nazi, I guess a heart wants what it wants. And now she finally cracks a smile. She slaps Billy on his knee. Says, I dreamed that I saw St. Augustine, alive as you and me. And he told me, if you gotta love, you better do it carefully. He told me, if you gotta love, you better do it carefully. 'Cause you know Audrey Hepburn disappears when she steps out of the frame. She's just a skinny kid with glasses, a good person but all the same. She's not the one you'd mark for a star. She's not one you'd mark for fame. She's just an accident of light and limbs, a projection of a lust and shame. Just an accident of light and limb, projection of a lust and shame. Projection of a lust and shame. That's it for this week. We'll see you next week on film, on video.